Gina Cho on right there. Okay, go ahead and start, and I'll chime back in. Okay, thank you.
Sure, sir. We welcome everybody, sir, on behalf of yourself, of course, sir, to our gender discrimination panel. Very important topic. It's still prevalent today in the workforce where there's unequal treatment. Really, there's very many different variations of it, but we're just talking today based on gender and identity, primarily how it impacts the women in the workforce. Sir, we also have 3 esteemed panel members, Ms. Renee Lee, Ms. Susan Sopra-Pena, Ms. Ginny Barahona, and we'll just be asking a series of questions, sir, and just hear their perspective and anyone else that wants to chime in. Also, sir, if we can start off, it would be really nice if the panel can do just a short introduction, basically their profession and maybe a little bit about their experience, just to get us up to speed. So if that's all right, sir, we'll just start off with Renee Lee.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Renee Lee. I live in Washington, D.C. I live in Arlington, Virginia, and I work at the State Department in Washington, D.C. I've been in the federal workforce for about 10 years now. Prior to that, I was in the Air Force, Army brat, and my specialty is public affairs. So I do that at the State Department, where I'm a deputy director of an office that does a lot of communications for the Secretary of State. And then I'm also a lieutenant colonel in the Air National Guard, where I'm also a PAO in the District of Columbia. Thank you.
Awesome, wonderful array of experience there, Renee. And then we'll just go over to Susan.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Susan Sopra-Pena. I graduated from West Point in 2002. Before that, I was enlisted. So I branched aviation, and I was also AG. I was a commander in Operation Enduring Freedom, Afghanistan. OEF 7. After that, I left the Army. I became an analyst in real estate and also a real estate investor on rental property. And I also have a job as federal government, also real estate. And I'm here in New York City. Nice to meet everyone.
Oh, awesome, Susan. I just don't know if there's any job you haven't done, but I certainly love the AG officer part as an AG officer myself. But thank you, Susan. All right, we'll head over to Ginny.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ginny. I work in New York City. I live in New Jersey, right over the river. I think I'm the only one who has not served in the military. I am an international development specialist. In my career, I have worked on post-conflict reconstruction, and I've lived and worked in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and in the US, both in the government, in the federal government, and in the private sector. Right now, I work for a foundation called Interledger that focuses on financial inclusion globally.
Oh, wow, that's really impressive. And I really like that you're going to give a different perspective too, outside of the military. So thank you again. All right, so we'll just open up because I also thank Renee because she's doing this while her daughter is having a birthday. So that's excellent multitasking. And I wanted to let you know that my son is having his 17th birthday today too. So we're going to go to dinner tonight. So totally understand the birthday thing. All right, the first question, Renee, for you is, why is it so important to you to mentor our junior leader and women leaders of the future?
Oh, I think that's a great question. I mean, if you see her, you can be her, right? I think we've heard that here and there. And I think in short, if you don't see women leaders around you, how can we expect to see gender equity now and then, you know, our daughters' futures and future generations? I think, you know, it's 2022 and we still see an imbalance of, you know, we see a gender disparity in different career fields inside and outside government. And for me personally, if I see a female leader, it really, you know, she really inspires me. It doesn't matter if, you know, if I work with her or not, but at least in my circles at the State Department and actually my commanding general in the District of Columbia National Guard, she's a 2-star female, awesome, inspiring, kick-ass leader, and she really inspires me to be better. And I want to see more of her. I want to see more of me in my future. And I think things changed a little bit, after I had a daughter myself, and I don't really, I see her just as one of all the other boys and girls in her class and in all her activities. And I hope that it'll continue to be that way, but, I know it won't be. But I think it's important that you need to see others in order to see others in the playing field later on. And for me personally, I also really enjoy mentoring and inspiring other young Asian American Pacific Islander women. I find that there are some cultural barriers that still exist that prevent them from being the best that they can be and their most confident selves. And I see more than what I see their maximum. And sometimes I think it just takes a little nudge and some mentorship in order for people to see that. I think that sums it up for me.
Thank you, Renee. We'll go to Susan now, and it's kind of neat because Susan, as a USMA grad, has some West Point cadets online and also another USMA grad. So I'm going to ask you the same question, which is, why is it so important to you to mentor our junior leaders and women leaders of the future?
Hi, so just wanted to say a special hello to all the West Point grads or the cadets rather that are online right now. Yeah, and I think it's very important. Like I said before at West Point, I was enlisted, and at West Point, I was there from like the late 90s and I graduated in 2002. And I think at the academy, you have more female mentorship, right? And back in the day, there really wasn't even that much diversity. If you think about it, the academy only allowed women. 1976 was the first class that entered. So when I was there, there was some mentorship, more so that, but when I got out in the Army, unfortunately, I didn't have that much mentorship, right? And even when I didn't have anyone to go to, right? Many times I had to solve issues on my own if there was one. Although I had some, I felt like I was left on my own. I got out of the Army as a captain. I feel that if I had more leadership, right, more support, for more women, and also I was speaking about this earlier, there's also a distinction. And when you're a woman and you're a minority woman, you're a lot different than when you're a Caucasian woman, right, or seen as white. You are treated much differently. Many times I felt, I was giving it my all, I'm here deployed, I'm commanding, I'm dealing with all these issues, getting things accomplished. But for whatever reason, sometimes it was never enough. And, I never had anyone reinforce that, hey, you're doing a good job. Your leadership is, what we need. So because of that, I think I needed that mentorship, especially if I saw more minority women. I think more minority women should have helped raise up, the others around them. And I didn't have that. So I think it's extremely important because it creates a culture of diversity and, acceptance rather than all of them against me, right? And it's not until I got out and became a civilian, one of the things I always say, if I had had that leadership, maybe I wouldn't have done so well, in the outside world, because I learned how to deal with a-holes pretty much, right? When you learn how to deal with tough people, especially women, and you get out there and you fight for yourself when you're a civilian, it makes a world of a difference. So that's what I think is important.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very powerful too, that, also experience that are not so positive you can turn it into a positive and become stronger. So thank you. And so we'll go now to Ginny with the same question. Why is it so important to you to mentor our junior leaders and women leaders of the future?
Thanks. That's a great question. I got to where I am because of mentors that I had. And so on one hand, it's about paying it forward and helping the next generation of women leaders. What Susan said is very true. There's also a divide. It's not just gender, there's also a racial divide. And I think the more that one of the ways that we help to change kind of where we are and the one way to change equity is to have more of us there. And the way that we do that is we have to help each other come up. So that's why it's a little bit self-serving, and it's also a little bit paying it back.
Oh, wonderful. Yes, definitely. Pay it forward. Awesome. All right, we're gonna go back to Renee again. And Renee, the second question we have is, how do you handle when females, or we can say males, colleagues put you down or dismiss you, or they don't allow you to have that voice, you know, when you're sitting at the table, they kind of cut you off. So it'd be interesting to hear, how do you deal with something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I've been really fortunate to not have experienced so much of that in my careers, and which have primarily been in the Air Force and the federal government. But in the few times, I definitely, when I was younger, I would be quite quickly offended, and tempers fly. But as I've grown older, I've learned to try to really think about perspective, and especially if it's a female colleague, they grew up in a completely different time where they had to, act like one of the boys and and be a little bit more aggressive in a way that I think I try not to be. And so I try to think about that perspective and give that person a little bit of understanding space. Um, and I think, along my career, I've learned from such great female mentors and leaders that I just try to model the behavior that I want to see. And same thing for the men too. I think sometimes men just, it depends, I think, on who's been exposed to whom. So for me, I just try not to take it too personally. Really work on relationship building and try to understand their perspectives and just press on for me.
Thanks, Renee. That's really positive ways to deal with that. So we'll head over to Susan, and it's just for you, Susan, how do you handle, whether it be a male or female colleague who puts you down, or you're trying to speak and they'll just interrupt you and just don't let you have that voice? How do you deal with that, Susan?
Well, I think it's interesting because the way I dealt with it in the military is a lot different than the way I handled it once I became a civilian and, also worked with the federal government. In the military early on in my, my career, it's like, yeah, you're always going to have somebody put you down, whether it's, oh, you got into West Point because of affirmative action and all, if you're not smart enough, just sit there. And I would just, I don't know, I would just stare at them like, you got to be kidding, right? And I wouldn't speak up for myself. And, in hindsight, I'm like, well, even if I spoke up, what good was that going to do? Especially I'm coming out of 10th Mountain Division, got 10 guys in the room, 2 white females, and I'm the only one. And everyone there is like always going to, have a bone to pick with you. But now, I don't let it happen now. I'm a business owner now. Like I own my own real estate, I handle things a lot different because of the way I was back then. But, back then, what can you do? You're a second lieutenant all the way up to captain. You have all these people above you. And, when they say, oh, let's hear your thoughts. In actuality, I really did not care for my thoughts. So the way I handled it, I was just pretty much like say what I had to say and let it be done. I didn't, do anything dramatic or, pretty much I wish I had said more, but who knows what would have happened at the time, right? But now the way I handle it now is I address it on the spot, especially like in the business world. You can't allow that to happen because your business will fail if you don't speak up. So that's what I do now.
Oh, that's wonderful, Susan. And I beat myself up too, because there are some things I remember as hindsight 2020 I should have inserted, and it could have been a teachable moment for someone, but I think I was too junior to realize that I should have done it. But yeah, I think going forward, definitely we need to do that. So thanks again.
Yep.
All right, we're going to go to Ginny. And so Ginny, how do you handle when your colleagues, male or female, put you down, dismiss you, or they just don't think that you need to have voice your opinion at that moment? How do you deal with that?
So very similar to Susan and Renee. When I was younger, obviously it's much more intimidating, and you kind of just take it, and you are upset afterwards, and and that's just kind of how it was. One of the biggest ways to deal with that today is that you have to deal with it before you ever get into that situation. And that's with really allying with other women and men who are supportive to ensure that when you are together, when someone does that to you, someone else is also jumping in and saying, hey, Renee didn't finish what she was saying, or that was a great idea that Susan brought up first. That actually happens extremely often. And so knowing who your allies are and you being an ally when that time comes for someone else, that I think has been the most effective way, because it creates an environment that lets people know this will not be tolerated. That it's not just, you know, when you do that to one person, other people are going to come in and say, knock it off. And so that I have found to be most successful. When it still you know, when it does happen, it's very hard, but you know, you have to stand up and you have to say, excuse me, you know, I didn't finish what my thought was, or, you know, bring up, like, you know, you want to try to not be combative about it, but bring up the, you know, efficacy of the conversation. You know, if you're bringing up a concern and they don't want to hear the concern, then you reiterate that, like, I'm bringing up this concern. And if it's not, you know, if you're not worried about it, then let's put that, you know, then we should share that with the group, or, you know, just put it out there that, like, this concern is being shared and it's not being listened to. And you kind of have to figure out ways to do that in, like I said, in a non-combative way. It's a skill that sometimes I'm okay at and sometimes I'm not so great at, but that's it.
Thanks, Jenny. That's really helpful about the allyship. Like, I think we do that whenever we get on staffs. Like, you know, I want to be a good team player and a good teammate, because you have to back each other up, you know, many times in the boardrooms. And then effective ways to reiterate yourself in a polite, but, you know, a manner that you need to reiterate what you were saying. So very helpful tips. Thank you. All right, we're going to head over to Renee, unless Renee, you have to depart because we're about 20 minutes past.
Yeah, Christine, I'll take this question, and I'm so sorry. I need to the birthday
Okay.
party.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So you made it to question 3, which is most excellent, Renee. So you were here for a good while. All right, Renee, the third question is, how can we recruit and retain more women in our workforce?
I think simply we need to be there. We need to be present. We need to step up, and we need to be seen. I think, first of all, you know, I think, as I said in my, I think in the first question, if you can see her, you can be her. And that's something that I really took away from some of my senior NCOs, excellent, strong female leaders. I think it's important to see female leaders across the board, volunteer for opportunities, speak up. You know, the worst that people can react to, whatever you say, is that's dumb, or that's, I don't agree with you. And so what, right? I think it's important to continue to mentor others. And, you know, relationship building is something that Ginny and Susan both addressed. That's a very, very important strength, and something that I would definitely rely on in the State Department. I cannot do my job without allyship here and there. And I think also we need to encourage other women, you know, I'll be honest, in the State Department, when under the previous administration, a lot of my female friends just left the government, and because they didn't agree with the election results, rather than, you know, I think we all took an oath to the Constitution to serve our public. There is one more thing I wanted to say. Oh, yes. A lot of my Asian American and Pacific Islander junior friends, a lot of them came in as interns, and they did not get a lot of support in their home environments to join the government or the military, because it didn't quite match their parents. And I know we're talking about stereotypes, but stereotypes exist for a reason. It didn't quite fit the neat doctor or the engineer or the lawyer mode and model. And a lot of families left their home countries due to political persecution or what have you. And so I think it's important for us to show that you can have an honorable career in any field, you know, including the government and the military, even if it doesn't quite fit with their immigrant parents' initial hopes. And I think it's important for us to step up and show that you can have a good career. I'm just reading the chat, a good career really anywhere. So thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
Christine, just not to interrupt, but I know Renee is going to have to attend. We'll have to attend to Leslie's birthday. I just want to do a shout out. I witnessed her promotion to Lieutenant Colonel yesterday at the Korean War Memorial with her father, Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Lee, that actually promoted her. So she's in a scale of progression from the State Department where she's actually assigned, but she's also now working at the White House Office of the Asian American Engagement Office, and she's progressing very well. Her husband is Major Jason Yee. There's the Lee and the Yi, the yin and the yang, you might say, on that family, and very proud of her and her progression. So I think she's going to rise to prominence here one day. And she's a staunch member of our PPALM board, and also was a member of PPALM, and she's our VP for communication. So again, Renee, thanks very much for participating.
Thank you, sir.
Give our best to Leslie as
ma'am.
she grows up to be 21 here next year. So very bright girl. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Renee. Happy birthday and congrats.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks again, sir. Yeah, that's a very well-deserved promotion. They got it right. All right, we'll head over to Susan. And Susan, just your thoughts on how we can recruit and retain more women in our workforce. A lot of them are also leaving due to family. Also, there's some telework also issues where some people are not getting the maximum amount of telework. And just your thoughts on that, please.
Right. So, how can we support women? This question, it's kind of difficult because, you know, you want to retain good talent, right? You want to promote from within, but there are situations with, you know, you have, especially in the federal government, from what I've seen in the agency that I've worked in, you see typically a lot of the Asian Pacific Islanders are the ones that do the bulk of the work, right? It's like the bar is set higher for them to even enter the agency, right? They want a, you know, master's degree, they want a PhD, they want all this, but yet when, like, for example, some of my colleagues will walk in with a GED, right? And then they'll say, oh, you know, this guy, whatever, John Smith, he's so great, blah, blah, blah. So that right there, when you see that, it's very hard to retain people because they're like, well, how come this guy here, you lowered the bar for him, right? And for me, you want me to, you know, make miracles happen. How is that? So I think what we need to do is actually call people out on it. You know, and I know that sounds tough because people do not want to lose their jobs, and it's much more different perspective now that I'm, you know, that I'm more financially independent than what I was, right, in these other positions. But I think that's what you need to do. You need to call people out on it. And also, if you see somebody being disrespected, you know, like, bring it up to them, like, hey, so what happened here, you know, and at least you're putting it on the record that you recognize that there's an issue. And I think when you put things on the record, or I'll follow it up by an email, I've done it before when somebody was, you know, somebody of he was from Bangladesh industry, in Bangladesh ancestry, you know, somebody said something to him that wasn't quite right. So I followed up with an email. Hey, let me get this straight. Is this what you said to so-and-so? And by doing that to them, they're well aware that, you know, that they're doing something that's not right. And by calling people out and bringing attention, right, to the way you need to respect people of all, you know, diverse cultures, by doing that, I think you're helping the situation because you're making them aware, and you're letting them know that me as an Asian Pacific Islander, I'm not your workhorse, right? Don't expect me to do all the jobs of all the GS 14s and 15s out here, yet you hire Joe Schmo with a GED and you praise him for just walking through the door today and eating a bagel. So that's what I think. You need to call people out and let the people know who do the butt of the work, right, that they're appreciated and that they need to fight for themselves. Because as Asian Americans, typically we're more quiet, right? The quiet, you know, hardworking people. But you need to call these people out. Otherwise, they're going to work you to your death.
Oh, no, that's really true. I know a colleague was just talking to me about that yesterday. I think Asian Americans are less apt to ethically self-promote themselves. Also, you know, don't call it out when something's wrong, but that makes me really happy to hear, because that really is unacceptable. And, you know, hiring practices too, you can kind of work that around and not get the most merit-based qualified person. So I'm really happy to hear that, Susan. Thank you. All right, we'll go to Ginny, and I'll just ask you again, how can we recruit and retain more women in the workforce?
Definitely second what Susan said, and creating that environment. And you're not alone, right? Like, you should have allies in the workplace, identify who those allies are, be open with them. And I have mentors that I really I really value and cherish, and talking to people about what you're going through to also get a sense of, like, what is the appropriate way, when is the right time to say something about it, is really helpful. In terms of recruitment, it's such a good question that the country is struggling with right now, right? I think a big piece of it is the first thing is to ask women, what do they need? What would keep them at work? When I was at USAID, I thought it was so interesting that childcare is like a big concern. And like, one of the things that AID is really good at is being flexible with people's schedules. They can go and pick up their kid from school if their child is sick, and come back to work, or work from home. They were really good at that. And what they found was that men valued that incredibly as much. There are things that we assume only women care about. And then we find out, no, actually, there's a bunch of dads here that also care about this and really value that. And so really asking women, what will keep them, what's hindering them from going back to work, what's hindering them from wanting to progress, or why are they leaving, and really drilling down. I think for parents that have children, that childcare is a big issue. And having childcare close to their workplace is really, really important. And then for people who don't have children, I think it's opportunities to rise, right? Like, if we only see men being chosen for certain special assignments and certain programs, leadership programs, that's a real problem. And those things have to be revisited to see, how do we ensure that there are women, that there are people of color, that there are women of color that are in here, and really asking all of those different communities, disabled people, what are the things that you need to thrive here? Because you'd be surprised at how much you might think it's something for a disabled American, and it turns out it's something that impacts everyone. It reminds me of, I live in the New York City area now. One thing I miss about Washington, D.C. is that it's so ADA accessible, but the people who were benefiting from ADA was not just disabled Americans, it was also parents with small children that had to be in carriages, elderly people who needed assistance walking, all benefited from all of that. And so I think it's ask the right questions, and then really figure out how do you tailor it, because the thing that women are asking for is something that helps not just women, it helps the community as a whole.
Yeah, that's really profound, Jenny. I really like that, because healthcare and things like that, and childcare is not just a female problem, that's a family issue. And also, I like what you said about surveys, that you just have to ask a lot of times what your workforce wants, and then that's how you baseline it, for solutions. And I wanted to say, yes, absolutely, like, flexible work schedules is a very big thing I know in the fourth estate agencies right now. And we just implemented, additional gliding, flexible, work schedules to meet, not only females, but all of the requests, for a more family work balance. So great answers. Thank you. So we'll head over to the next question with Susan. And so some say that women leaders who are successful, they have really very busy work schedules. They're committed to a lot of things. So there's not that much time for them to be actual mentors to many mentees. And I was just thinking, what are your thoughts on that? And as a successful female leader yourself, how do you make that time?
Well, I think now, in the business that I have, I can mentor more, or just what I do sometimes, especially like in real estate, when I'm dealing with one of my properties, like if somebody wants to learn more about it, I'll, call them over, especially when like an emergency arises. For example, I had to replace 3 water heaters, right? And what I do is I'll, if somebody wanted to know more about real estate, I'll invite them over and say, hey, look, I have an emergency, because it's what I'm doing and it's a teachable moment. And then they get to see that it's not all like bells and whistles. It's not just money you're making, tons of money. You also have to be there and to work on the hard stuff. And I think that's what's important about mentorship. You can talk all you want and say to somebody, oh, you're going to be a good leader, do this, do that. But until, somebody knows, hey, you're going to get your hands dirty and undo these 3 water heaters and, and spend a ton just to fix this, and your whole weekend is going to be ruined. I think those are the times that's when you can make time to teach somebody, rather than, phone calls and, getting coffee or whatever and discussions, they're important too. But I think having them see you in a situation that's not that glamorous is the way to help them out. So they can at least know that, yeah, it's a stressful, business, but you can overcome all those hurdles.
Thank you, Susan. And I really like your comment about making time. So excellent. All right, Jenny, I'm going to ask you the same. And that's, some say that our women leaders who are successful, they're just very overwhelmed with what they have to do at work. And then they have home life. And it's very hard to become, a mentor to many people. So just wondering what your thoughts were on that dilemma.
Yeah, I think I think you have to schedule the time to do it. You have to be committed to doing it. You either are committed to it or not. And if you're committed to it, you schedule time out, whether it's, an hour each week or what have you. You have to make time to do it. Mentoring isn't, it's not really, to me, it's kind of a lifestyle, to be frank. Like, you have to either be committed to it and you're helping other people and figuring out how to make everyone successful, how to be a team player. You either are that or you are not. And if you're not, then maybe it's better you're not a mentor, actually. So that's the only way I know that I knew, even for myself at my busiest time. What I will say is that it's helpful if you want someone to mentor you, it's helpful to pinpoint like 2 or 3 questions that you want answered. What I find interesting about that is, I think that's a great way to do it. You may wind up with an hour of that person's time. In fact, you're probably going to go way over than just the 3 questions. But when you tailor the 3 questions, it helps people think through, like, oh, I can answer this. I can do this. I can help. And then once you're in the room with them and you start off with those questions, you'll be amazed at how much they'll open up other areas. The other thing I would say that I found, I worked in the Obama administration, and we were like, you get questions left and right every day, all the time. Everybody wants to have coffee with you. Everyone wants to talk to you about foreign affairs, about national security, all this. They all want to get in. And one of the things that I would say also for people who are looking for mentors and who are mentees is, don't get discouraged. The reality is, sometimes somebody will see your questions and they don't feel that they can help you at all. They don't, and they're not going to tell you that. And so they just kind of don't respond. And so I would also say, just don't lose hope and don't think it's you, because sometimes I found that happened, that sometimes I felt like I did that, and I hated that I did that. And I had to figure out a better way to communicate. But sometimes it's true, like, especially for like an administration, it's extremely difficult. There are many people that have to see your qualifications and so forth. It's not up to me. It's at all. Like, I almost have no say. I have no say. Let me clarify. I have no say in what goes on. And so sometimes it's overwhelming, and it's like, I don't know how to help this person. I don't know what to do. So I think it's on, mentors have to be committed to it. If you want to be a mentor, it is a little bit of a lifestyle, and you got to be committed to it. And for mentees, don't, kind of hone in so that you kind of make people feel like, I know what I'm going to ask you. I'm not saying, oh, I have no idea, just help me. Like, that is not a great feeling, to have to like dig and figure out. But also don't lose hope. Keep going. Find someone else. And sometimes people come back to you like weeks, months later, which is always weird, but it happens.
Thank you. And it's really helpful when you said just you got to commit and you got to put it on the calendar. I think that's really great advice. We have generals here also on the line, which I'm just very impressed that they can mentor so many people. So just pause for a moment if any of our generals would like to chime in.
I'm happy to chime in. Thanks so
ma'am.
much for this great panel. I hope you can hear me okay. But
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to say, I just did so many of these comments, and thank you so for the insights, because I think it's important to continue to talk about this. I'm so grateful for the mentors, and even General Taguba, who's been a great mentor. And by the way, most of my mentors were men who we scheduled, took the time and challenged me to mentor others. And I'm committed to that. But, in my position now as the president of the East-West Center, of course, a lot of people, just like, you were all saying that it can be a lot. So it's helping them also to find other mentors too, who can give them more time, but maybe even a short period of time. And I'm committed to it. So I try to make it around a breakfast or a lunch, or some kind of activity that I can fit it in, or even inviting them to watch and observe something. Because when you're really busy and a senior leader, having them come and observe is powerful as well, to shadow. So there's different ways in which to mentor as well, or even introducing them to people that can provide those opportunities, creating a network for them. That has been very, very helpful. And General Taguba has done that for me. A lot of the networks, he will link me, because a lot of people demand his attention, especially after his pictures in the Army Museum at Fort Belvoir. It's like, can he mentor me? So, but thank you so much.
Oh, awesome, ma'am. And that was really helpful, ma'am. I like that because I have a couple of mentees, but you got to eat lunch. So just invite your mentee to lunch. And I really like the shadowing too. I mean, if there's a neat event that's going on and that mentee can learn something about it, that's so helpful. So thank you, ma'am.
Thanks, Susie. You didn't have to mention my name about the photo at the museum. It's used as a target practice. So at a game. I'm just kidding. Okay. Enough of that. Gerald Camilla, maybe you could add and after that, General Hirai.
Yeah, I think what I would emphasize is what someone already said, is that being a mentor is a commitment. And as Tony and Jimmy probably feel the same way, we've spent decades in the military doing different things, given our MOSs or our assignments. But I think that one thing we see very clearly is that regardless of what role or what level of rank you are or level of responsibilities, your primary task every day, your primary task is to grow the bench of leaders for the future. And that involves, in this context, mentorship or coaching or whatever word you choose to use, but it is investing your personal time and experiences to help pave the way or to help others, peers, even superiors in some cases, and subordinates, help rationalize what they're seeing and experiencing and put it in the appropriate context so they can then learn and move forward from it. So I agree. It was either Jenny or Susan or both of you talked about the level of commitment. It's like the air you breathe every day. If you're truly, if mentoring should be part of everybody's DNA, if you were brought up in the right leadership environments. Secondly, and then I'll turn the floor over to Tony or Jimmy, is that there's a variety of definitions of what a good mentor is. But what I would say is a key differentiator is a mentor who can make the invisible visible. And it's about a mentor who not only is there in a safe space to share ideas or share perspectives or whatever else, but also is willing to stand up and be your advocate in the right audiences. Be that connecting you to a different network, like Tony's example, or in the context of corporate America or even in government, standing up during a peer review or something like that, and actually standing up and says, you know, Jeannie's a hard worker. No one ever sees the work that she does, but she's responsible for 80% of this organization's contributions. So therefore, we need to spotlight on her and make her visible. And in many cases, once the invisible, using this example of Ginny, becomes visible to the right audiences, that's when careers begin to change. So to me, a mentor's role is more than talking to the invisible and helping the invisible out, but more importance, I think, is helping make whoever is invisible visible to the right audiences or to the greater whole. So just two things from my foxhole. Tony, I'll turn the floor over to you or Jimmy.
Thanks, Jason. Jimmy, you want to contribute? Are you still there? James? Jean Hirai?
Yeah, I'm
there it is.
here, Tony.
Okay, thank
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
you. Yep.
Yeah, well, first off, what another terrific PPALM discussion and expertly facilitated panel, and just terrific comments. And I really appreciate the shared experiences, and especially for folks like me and you know, maybe Jason and Tony, to hear these voices, really important to help us figure out this world we live in. And this has been very, very helpful to me. So thank you. You know, I just make one comment, and it's not just because Susie's on the net, but you know, as I was listening to these ladies, you know, and it was brought out that what Susie said is that, you know, there are a lot of males that try to help women. And, you know, I think, at least for me, I see some limitations in my ability to empathize and understand truly the situation. And I've relied on folks. In fact, Susie may recall, wasn't that long ago, you know, I had this former intern, who for some reason had stayed connected with me, and we had, she progressed to where she's about ready to enter government. And so I just asked Susie, I said, hey, you know, you mind talking to this young lady? And I think literally Susie dropped some things that she had on her plate. I mean, she was recently inducted as the president there at East West Center, but she took time, you know, to do that. And what that demonstrated, though, what I knew would happen was that I thought that Susie would be very interested herself in getting to know this person because of her background, the things that she had already accomplished in the NGO world in Africa, and where she was headed. And I think that's one of the keys to mentoring, is that if it's a job for you, it's probably not the right job. I mean, I think the mentors who get into this are truly fascinated by learning about others, and whether we can be helpful or not, that learning is just so important, powerful. And yeah, I just wanted to mention that we are all learning. And that's why, Tony, I salute you and the team there for continuing to look for ways for us to share these kinds of experience. So from Mililani, mahalo.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks to my general officer friends. You know, someone once told me, and this is part of PPALM's competency, that mentorship or mentoring is not a transactional action. It's transformational. And seminars like this, you know, we can learn from each other. I'm familiar with Jeannie and Susan, has been members of PPALM for a long time, and they've dealt, I know Jeannie dealt with her own experience at USAID. And Susan, of course, is going through a process with the Government Services Administration. And there's things that they had mentioned that I know they won't be able to expand on it because of the time limit here, but it is fascinating what they go through. Yeah, I mean, it's very unpopular, but then again, because of their experience, they can share with others. And our group have done mentorship as far away as Korea and as far away as Ireland, where people just say, I need to talk to somebody, right? So I said, well, who else have you spoken to, or what are you going through, and how can we help you? It's a fascinating item, this thing called mentorship. And as Jason, General Camille, and General Various Thumb, and General Hirai have said, that if you're interested, you may be committed, but not necessarily owning your problems, because we try to transform it and making sure that there's progression along the way. And if we can't solve it, then we refer you to someone that could typically help you. But it can be emotionally draining. Gender discrimination, especially. Next seminar, we're dealing with navigating sexual harassment. But our current environment now is so, you might say, has changed over time. But people-to-people contact is more important than anything else. So I'll turn it back to you, Christine, and perhaps our two panelists can answer a couple more questions. If not, we'll open it up to our audience here for questions. Thank you.
Thanks, General Taguba. And yes, absolutely great advice from our generals and yourself, sir. So thank you. So we'll just go on to the next question. We'll go to Susan. And Susan, how do you respond when colleagues, male or female, describe you as a female, as emotional or aggressive, but then you will hear them refer to male colleagues as passionate or driven? So has that happened to you, and how do you deal with that?
Yes, of course it's happened. I mean, like I want to reiterate, my response when I was in the military is a lot different than it is now, especially with working at GSA. For example, in the past, if somebody said that, I would just, are you emotional, or does this bother you? I would just look at them and be like, what? I would answer their question with a question. I would say, why does it bother you? In that way, it's letting them know that they're annoying without actually telling them that what they're doing is appropriate. Because they'll say stuff like, oh, yeah, or they'll refer to where you come from. Oh, isn't it, people from like where you come from, aren't they, a little more like sensitive, or just, they'll say things like that. I'm like, why is that where you come? Is that how the people are where you come from? So that's how that would go when I was in the military. But now, at GSA, I would turn it around, turn it around. If somebody says, you're emotional, or, a guy wouldn't be upset at this. I'm like, oh, really? Why not? Well, I would just keep following it up with a question to really make them see that what they're asking, what they're talking about is just pretty much senseless. And, and once you do that, I think you throw it back at their face without actually being aggressive about it. Just like laughing at their face, like you're letting them know that they're ridiculous for even suggesting something like that. And they're going to move on to the next person. But once I see somebody and I'm a very small person, like I'm like 5 feet tall, but whenever I see somebody like bullying somebody else, especially it's like GSA, I always bring up hey, why are you doing this? Like, I just always ask questions to really have them rethink whether or not what they're doing is something they should be doing. So that's how I handle it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. And yes, and then they start to realize, and you're educating them too. So awesome. And then we'll go to Jenny for that one. And how do you respond when your male colleagues, or it could be women too, just say you're too emotional or you're being aggressive, but that if another male colleague was doing that, it would be not frowned upon, but would be more like they're a passionate or driven person?
I agree with Susan. You definitely got to got to point it back out to them. I will hear that more often about other people. I'll hear somebody will say, you know, I think she's aggressive or she's too emotional. And one of the biggest thing that I always do, partially because of it's my own self trying to understand what's happening, is I actually don't like words that are too broad, right? Like I don't like the word smart. I don't like the word nice. Like, I don't know what that means. What does that mean exactly, right? And that's what I find myself going back and asking, like, well, when you say, what do you mean emotional? What does that mean operationally? How is that impacting what we're doing here? And I find that the minute I say that, it makes people have to rethink what they're saying, right? And so more with the aggressive part, sometimes people will come up with something that's actually important. Sometimes they'll rethink it and be like, well, no, they're not aggressive, but like, they're just really ambitious. And again, I have to go back and say, well, operationally, how does that impact what we're doing? What do you mean? What exactly? So really asking them to drill down to see like, what exactly is the problem? You know, are they not allowing other people to speak? Is that what's happening? Or is it that, you know, it's just a them problem? It's like, this is not a her problem, this is a you problem. So that's definitely something that I try to drill down on, and usually and always in that conversation, it'll come to light, and a resolution will come up where people realize like, oh, I guess they're not really aggressive. It's more this other thing, which is resolvable. So that's something that I have used that has been pretty successful. And then again, like what Susan, like when it comes, you know, to me, like I'm a little bit like Susan. I tend to use humor to kind of calm down a situation. And if somebody, I don't think anyone's ever said that I'm too emotional, actually. But if somebody did, I would be like, I am emotional. I'm emotional about this. This is making me cry on the inside, you know? So like, I have gotten away with kind of pushing back in a way that's not like, you know, I'm going to file a complaint against you for saying this, but it also puts people on notice that like, hey, you know, think about what you're sharing here and what you're putting out here, and make sure that, you know, you're not jumping to like stereotypes, which it kind of sounds like you are.
Oh, that's a wonderful answer, really showing them that they're being stereotypical. So that's very helpful. And really, this is our last question. This one for Susan is, what words of advice can you give our PPALM teammates to prevent gender discrimination in the workplace?
Words of advice. Always know that there are alternatives, and you know, if you're in a like stressful situation or an environment that's hostile, it's not going to last forever, you know. And what I mean by that is when you're in the moment and you know you feel like you're being singled out or discriminated against, you're like, oh God, I can't take this anymore. You know, it's like you want to hit somebody or something. You just want out of that situation. But if you tell yourself, you know what, I'm going to learn from this experience, and in the future, you know, when I'm in a much better position, I'm not going to put, you know, anyone through this. I will not, you know, allow anyone else to go through this. And that's one of the things that I said before, I wish I had more positive. I wish I had a mentor actually when I was in the Army, because I didn't all those years. I actually learned a lot from the NCOs and, you know, a lot from, you know, some peers, but I really didn't have anyone there. And so my word of advice is sometimes you have to be your own mentor, as sad as that sounds. You know, if no one's out there, you know, willing to mentor you, and even if you seek out mentors and they're just not available, sometimes you have to be your own cheerleader, because many times I've had to mentor myself, you know, look for other ways to, you know, I run marathons, do something, you know, and just pretty much, or read, you know, stories or bios of people that have gone through a lot, because then you'll know that you are not alone and things will get better. And that's it, pretty much.
Oh, that's really great sharing, and it will pass, but it just seems like a really tough situation, but it does pass. So thank you very much for that. And then Jenny, just asking you the same thing, like, what are some of your words of advice to our teammates to prevent gender discrimination, or just words of advice in closing?
I would, everything Susan said, and then the other, I would add two things. One is to, build allyship, be an ally so that you have allies, and build that before, don't wait, for things to arise. That's the first thing I would say. And then the second thing is just to, think about the questions that you're asking. If you're the leader, ask the question and ask it individually and allow people to give you responses anonymously. Because, you can't ask like, how can we prevent gender discrimination to a bunch of men and women who are all colleagues together? Because they're not going to tell you, right? Well, this one over here is making my life miserable. Nobody's going to do that. So, as if you're in leadership, to really ask the right questions, ask it in a way that's private, so people feel that they can share what is happening, and allow them, find a way to allow them to do it anonymously. That would be helpful. And build allies, you got to do that the whole time so that you're not alone. Because when it happens, you can't predict when it's going to happen, right? And so you have to build that infrastructure beforehand so that when you get there, you're not by, you feel less like you're by yourself. That's it.
Thanks, Jenny. That was really helpful. And I really took a lot away from that as well. So we're definitely, when you want to get to changing the culture, those folks that you need to get after need to feel like when they make recommendations, it's not attributional. So that's very good advice. So also I wanted to say Friday is Women's Equality Day. So really all of you speaking today are honoring that as well. So thank you very much. And I'll hand it over to General Taguba.
I think we have time for other questions from the gallery. Juan, can we do that? Our producer.
Yes, sir.
Okay, please do ask freely. Let's spend another 15 minutes or so, because it's Saturday. People have chores to do and naps to take. I'm just kidding. Anybody wants to contribute? Like Denise, I saw you make, Denise Liu.
Oh, no,
Yes,
thank you. I have nothing to
thank
add.
you.
Been good.
Christopher, anybody else on the call? Great. Okay. Time is up. Listen, our seminars are pretty much, we designed
Tony,
it.
sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead.
Sorry, Tony. Can I ask our panelists and our superb facilitator to offer us at least one very exciting story that they want to close us out with on this great Saturday? I mean, you've given us some tremendous insights, as I said earlier, but I just ask you, think of something that you really want to mention, a really positive thing to close us out.
I know that all three of them have fascinating stories that they've shared with me over time, and please do. We won't report you ladies for anything, but just to capture your own personal story as part of our seminar. Christine, you can start.
Oh, sir, can I go last? I'm going to think of something.
Okay,
I'm still
we'll go with
thinking though,
Jeannie.
but I really like the question. I'm still thinking.
Yeah. All right, Jeannie. Something that happened to you that is lasting, that just if you can recall. Because I can't tell that story. So, I mean, I'll let you tell the story.
I don't know what story you're thinking of. I'm like, it's true. Like there are like a lot of great stories. And then of course, once you're asked on the spot, it's like, what? Blank white noise. I don't know what to say.
Maybe at your time at at your last job?
Oh, yeah. So I was working for a company that has that works on investing in companies, in a company. It's a nonprofit venture fund. So they invest in companies that are impacting poverty. Really exciting mission, amazing investees. But the culture in the company was tough. There were a lot of racial issues. There was absolute gender issues, but not in the way that you would think. It was largely run by white women, and it was difficult as somebody who's Asian and Latina, and who does not come from the economic background that they do. And so one of the things that was very interesting about how discrimination, how like this kind of thing plays out, is that they were all friends with each other. Whether they had the competency or not to lead the team they were on, they were all friends with each other. And so they were hiring all this incredible talent who are diverse underneath, and just couldn't get anything done. In the time that I worked there, all of the Black staff left. Brilliant minds. Latino staff wouldn't stay, but interestingly and heartbreakingly, as an AAPI, Asian staff were okay, and again, it was kind of that thing where like they just kind of were like, just kind of don't acknowledge what's happening and just keep doing a good job and keep, and so the situation just never changed. And I wound up leaving because it was untenable. And sometimes that is the answer, but I'll tell you the experience from that. Whenever I interview, I actually talk about it I have to think about diplomatic ways to talk about it and talk about it as a learning experience. And it has actually opened up incredible doors for me now, which is very, I didn't think that would happen. One of my mentors had said, like, it was actually one of my mentors that said, you have to bring this up. You have to, and he helped me figure out how to talk about it in a way that's productive, so that it kind of paints a picture of like, hey, I like to work on teams where we are invested in each other's success. I don't want to be on a team where I've got a sharp elbow people who are on my own team in order for me to succeed. And it actually has been incredibly helpful, and has steered me towards the company I'm at now and some other opportunities that are really exciting. So I don't know if
So there was a silver lining there.
Yeah. Like sometimes it can definitely feel like, like you're all by yourself and like, how am I going to make this work? And sometimes you have to recognize, like, you shouldn't make it work because this is broken. Don't make this work. Like, you have talent and you need to go somewhere where that talent is appreciated. And for sure, like, particularly in that place, the Black staff and the Latino staff and some of the Asian staff were absolutely, and some of the white staff were allied together and would try to help each other. But, taking space away from it, I'm like, man, I spent an extraordinary amount of time trying to figure out how to survive instead of how to work on these poverty issues which is the purpose of this whole place. And so sometimes in the dark, in difficult circumstance, you get a lot of clarity that helps you in the long run. It may not feel like it at the time, though. I will say that.
Well, there's some funny moments there, but at least now you're employed again. That's good. All right.
Sir, I'm ready now.
Yeah, okay.
I was able to think a little bit.
Okay.
Sir, so I would say growing up in the military in my junior years, I would say it was kind of best to go along with the group. You didn't want to be too different. You didn't want to talk about how you're different with your culture. You just wanted to be successful and show that you were competent and good at your job. So there wasn't a lot of sharing of your culture and your heritage. But I would say now what I really like, it's very positive because the administration is and the SecDef has talked about diversity and inclusion and the importance of that. I would say when I was appointed as the diversity and inclusion co-chair of my agency, that was really where I could make a difference in changing the culture. It's very important for the senior leaders to espouse it, but when somebody that has lived it is in a position to make change, I feel that that's very helpful. So I listened to all of the ERG leaders. There's the Asian American Pacific Islander, there's the Hispanic, individuals with disability, LGBTQIA. Those different ERG leaders come to me as the co-chair. And also I'm also, my primary job is the Human Resources Director. I'm able to implement their recommendations and changes. Some of their complaints were, well, in a fair and open and merit-based promotion or selection, you know, why do we still have mostly male Caucasians when we have very, very qualified applicants, females and minorities? Well, we're able to change that and at least make it more equal by doing blind hiring where you remove the names on the resume. There are other things that we can do, like on the certification process, and make sure all certs are looked at. And you don't have that first initial screen of, you know, because sometimes we know females and minorities don't rate themselves high. They have issues with self-promotion. So just look at all of the applicants that they're qualified. So another thing that I really like is nowadays, we ask you to be proud of your differences. We want to hear different perspectives. Before it was just kind of like, well, the majority is saying this and that's what it's going to be, right? But now you sit there in a boardroom and you really have to speak out on that. They want to hear your perspective. They need to hear your perspective because a different perspective means, you know, a better answer usually, a more collaborative decision where it's not just, you know, one group of people giving you the answer all the time. So that's also very helpful. And I think that if we can just promulgate that in PPALM and all of our other discussions where, you know, your voice is very important. Your experiences and what you've been through, you are an agent of change. So when you become in a position of authority or a position of influence, then it's very crucial to have your voice be heard. So a lot of times I would be in a boardroom and my answer is way off, right? And so then they would just laugh at it or just be like, wow, that's way off, Christine. I mean, why would you even think that? No, it's really a different perspective. You need to take that in consideration and maybe the end result will be better because there's probably many other people thinking the same way I'm thinking. I'm just bringing it to you because of my experience and background. So I think that's where we can help. We can bring that to the table, even if we're that only one at the table that's a female minority.
Thanks, Christine. That's
Thanks, sir.
very well. Thanks. Positiveness. All right, Susan. I know you have some funny moments and some trial moments with regards to your own case, but you may want to share the silver lining on your particular.
I can talk about it.
Okay.
Background, right. I'm glad the West Point cadets are listening to this because this is something, you know, people always tell you to step up and, you know, do the right thing, you know, when no one's looking, or say something if you see something that's wrong. So background, I'm here in New York City and I work for, as one of my jobs, General Services Administration, right? And you would think in New York City that the demographic of the workplace would be representative of the demographic of the, you know, New York City, environment, right? So anyway, I bring this up because I'm a contracting officer. I can negotiate on behalf of the U.S. government for real estate contracts, right? For all around New York City, Brooklyn, Queens, Long Island. Anyway, I went for a job that was asset manager, right, in the government, and it's far less tedious than what I have to do. You know, pretty much the duties are very similar, but it's good to know the New York market. Anyway, I go for this position and the panel's all white panel, first and second panel. I didn't even make the second panel, but anyway, 12 people. apply for the position, and it ends up going to a white guy from Texas who knows nothing about New York City. The credentials were less, everything was less. So, I would see it happen a lot here, in GSA, even contracting officers that have negotiated some of the toughest leases. I'm talking prospectus, congressional level leases. And then the hiring panel will always say, he's not good enough, and little things like that. And they would bring in people into the agency that barely graduated like community college, or, I'm not saying that that's not, that's something to look down on, but it's just the disparity in what the expectation was for a minority. It was immense, right? It was like the bamboo ceiling, as they always say, right? You expect more from the minority than you do the white person. Anyway, so I filed a complaint. At first I said, you know what, I deserve this position. I'd like whatever the position, whatever, at that time, the back pay wasn't much, and a public apology. I was like, I don't like this, because I kept looking at it over and over, looking at this guy's resume compared to mine, and these other people that they're putting forward. It's like, no. So the agency said, no, they don't want to do anything. They don't feel they did anything. So I took them to court. My attorney deposed them. They got caught lying. They got caught committing perjury, making fake notes, because they didn't even have any notes. They didn't take any notes, right? Because you would think you're, assessing 12 people. You didn't write down any notes. So, the guy's excuse was, in the, because we're in World Trade Center, the seating is circular. I couldn't find my seat. This is a guy who's been there for 33 years. Everyone he's always hired has been white, right? Never a minority. Then he said some family issues. So my attorney was like, so that means you don't remember where you put the scoring notes? You can't remember. So long and behold, we have a hearing. And at the end of the hearing, it was brutal for them, not for me. So at the end, I'll just read here, conclusions of law. This is by the judge. For the reasons set forth here, as well as relative record evidence and arguments not specifically addressed in this decision, complainant has established by preponderance of the evidence that she was not selected for the asset manager position based on her race, color, national origin. So everything I said that they did to me, now they have to pay for. So that's what I want to end with, that if you think you've been wronged, and yes, litigation is expensive, but take all your experiences from the past, and what you have to do is you have to go at them and say, you know what, you did me wrong and I want you to make this right. And this happened 2019. And yes, it's bothersome. Yes, you might have people staring at you, but it doesn't matter because you stood up for yourself. And even though you might be the only one in the room that believes in yourself, the hell with all those people that say nay, because you have to do what's right. So that's how I'm going to end things.
What I know of just being granted financial penalty on the side of GSA, and so she's gonna be happier. She's gonna be smiling a little wider than usual now. But it's not yet resolved, but I'm sure it will be resolved for the benefit of Susan. And this is the kind of struggle that we have. There was one story of me trying to help a major who was accused of falsely filing a financial agreement based on the divorce that she had with her husband, and taking care a custody case for the son. And it took about 3 years to get it done. She was removed from a lieutenant colonel promotion. And after a while, there was a commander's inquiry that basically said that she did the right thing. She followed the same rules and whatever have you. But it took a toll on Rochelle. I'll just use her name. She was restored to the promotion of lieutenant colonel 2 years ago. But it soured her taste in the military profession because she was removed from a command list as well, albeit because of false accusation, and to have her records expunged from the Human Resources Command. See, that's, and not even a tidbit of apology from the United States Army. And so she's now retired. She's happy with her family, but there's the kinds of things like that I don't know how you deal with, but she shared, because I try to help her navigate to the legal system, and we'll have, but I'm just happy that she's now, she can resolve all of that and have a life in her retirement. So, okay, well, we've gone over. I think we've heard some interesting dynamics here, comments, and that's very relevant to what we're doing today, leadership development and leadership assistance. And next month, September 24th, we'll go through our last seminar before our October 9th annual meeting in Washington, D.C. For those of you that want to come. It's our 15th anniversary. And to think I'm still at PPALM after 15 years, and because nobody wants to raise their hand and take over, but I'm trying to groom parts of the board to get us through our value and our competency. So with that, I'll turn it over to Christine and end the session.
Thank you, sir. I really did learn a lot today. I appreciate our guest speakers and also our generals for giving their esteemed and very wise advice, and everybody who joined in, especially our USMA cadets and USMA graduates. I think that was very helpful. We have a lot of good things to put in our kit bag. It has educated us, and I really appreciate it, sir. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks to our panel members again.
You all have a great weekend. Till see you next week. I mean, next month. Okay.
See ya. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Terrific job.
Thanks, sir.